Welcome to the AppInTop Mobile App Marketing Podcast.
For so many mobile app developers, it's an all-or-nothing battle out there in the App Store.
This AppInTop podcast is your mobile app marketing advantage.
Let's get that new app of yours moving to the top.
This is the AppInTop Mobile App Marketing Podcast.
And now your host, Michael Bauer.
Welcome. This is indeed the AppInTop Mobile App Marketing Podcast, produced by AppInTop.com. You can find our daily blog at blog.appintop.com. Also track us down on Facebook, facebook.com/AppInTop. And to keep everything uniform-like, we're on Twitter at AppInTop_com. AppInTop_com. Creating excitement around your game at the time of launch should be an essential part of your marketing strategy. Getting the attention of influential gaming bloggers takes time, but the coverage might just be what your game needs to shoot to the top of the App Store charts. Dan Hsu, the editor-in-chief of GamesBeat, joins us today to talk about how to get your game covered by the industry press. Hsu, thank you so much for taking the time today, sir.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, I went back, I did a little research. I found out that a video clip on Chartboost University where you're kind of addressing the challenges facing developers these days.
Now, the problem you guys are facing is there's obviously too much noise. You guys all know this, right? So there's like iOS, Google Play, Facebook. It's the consoles and Steam, of course. So, how do we get attention for your product when you launch it?
Well, we're hoping to answer that here, but let's give a developer a sense of the competition. As an example, Hsu, how many pitches do you get per day? So what are our developers up against? Like for today, for instance, how many pitches did you receive today alone?
Let's see. Just today, I would imagine it's about 2 in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. I probably received about 50 so far, would be a guess. And that number, it's going to go up and down. Or before conferences, like before a show like the Game Developers Conference, we'll have hundreds and hundreds a week. Like I could get over 100 in one day, and it's an impossible level of noise.
I can imagine that for you, you walk into your office, you sit down, you open up your inbox, you're just ready to get working. Hundreds upon hundreds of pitches come through. What separates some of those pitches that you see? Is there anything at that point, when you're talking about hundreds, is there anything that stands out at you? What does it take to sort of stand out and gather your attention?
It's very difficult because it's a really good question, because you have to imagine everyone's email busy these days, mm-hmm. right? I'm not the only one. And it's to the point where we're just looking for excuses to delete emails
yes.
rather than to respond, right? It's just like,
yes.
if I could get this out of my inbox, that's one less thing for me to think about. So anyone that emails press, looking for press, you have to kind of imagine that's what you're working up against. So how do I get your attention? So a couple of immediate things that come to mind is, and this is why PR was invented, is because when you have relationships with people, pre-existing relationships, that helps a lot. And that's not to say that journalists only listen to PR people and we only get our information through PR. But the fact of the matter is, I've been in this industry for almost 2 decades, and a lot of public relations people that I deal with, they know what works for me and what doesn't. They're not going to waste my time pitching me something that they know my outlet will never cover in a million years. So I know if I get an email from somebody asking me to check something out, that's probably already pre-vetted on some level for me. Of course, not always.
Right.
I'm not always going to bite, but it helps. So getting some PR help from an established agency or a freelancer contractor, that can help. The other key piece of advice I'd like to give people is treat it like how we think of what we do when we write stories, which means when I write a story, I need a good headline and I need a good lead, because those are the first 2 things that the readers are going to see, and it has to be able to get their attention, hook them, and then keep them to read the rest of the email. So if your subject head, for example, is ABC Game is on Kickstarter now, if I've never heard of ABC Game, and chances are if you're listening to this and you're listening to my advice, mm-hmm. I probably haven't heard of your game before. So why would that be a compelling reason to click on that email to read the rest of it? So you have to grab my attention first with the headline, make sure the lead of your email is really good to make me interested enough to read the rest of it to get to the actual good stuff,
Now, when we talk about the types of games covered on GamesBeat, is there a breakdown coverage for mobile, console, social games? Do mobile games get enough attention, in your opinion?
That's very difficult for press to cover because we're all a page view driven business and we want more and more traffic. So mobile games tend to not do well because if you think about like the biggest mobile games, right? Let's take an Angry Birds, for example. People don't really need to read anything on Angry Birds. They just play it. If you hear about it from a friend or you try a couple of turns on a friend's phone, then you go download it yourself. No one's seeking out reviews or previews or coverage on those games. So that's challenging. So what we try to do, but we know mobile is obviously a big part of the gaming market. It's big business. So we have to cover it. So we're always trying to find interesting ways to cover games. And I think this philosophy we try to apply to all games, even AAA console products, because we have so much competition that we're dealing with as well from other press sites. So we always want an interesting angle, and for developers who are creating these products, if they have that interesting angle that they could present or pitch to us, that's all the much better, rather than because we might not know, hey, there's a very interesting story behind your team or behind the creation of this product. You know, like if you told me, for example, hey, a 9-year-old programmed this game in 3 days, then I'm probably going to stop to read that email and see what this product is about, rather than the game itself.
Something that's piqued your interest a little bit at that point.
Definitely.
What can you give us an example? Do you have a game recently that maybe really grabbed your attention, and what was it about? Was it something that came in the form of that headline to you, or something other that sort of grabbed your attention?
Well, there's one example that always sticks in my mind. There was an email that I got one time that said, Tim Schafer is wrong. And Tim Schafer is a well-known developer. He made a lot of adventure games back in the 80s and 90s, and he's still very prolific today. And if you're in the game being business, you've heard of this guy. And the very first thing I read is Tim Schafer is wrong. Nothing about the game. I didn't know what was going on, and I wanted to read further. There was another email that I remember getting, don't let your 23-year-old run your social media. And I was like, okay, that's very intriguing because that is a common problem. A lot of young people working, doing social media, so I wanted to read further. And both of those headlines, these are old examples, so I don't actually remember the product. But they did get me to listen, and it didn't go into that instantly delete pile.
Is there for you personally, Shu, and honestly, is there a specific genre that you prefer, that you find yourself being sort of the specialist in covering?
No, me personally, no, because I have to be system and console and genre agnostic. I have to make sure I keep an eye on everything because I might personally play a lot of first-person shooters, for example. I love sports, but I don't play sports video games, for example. But I know that, okay, I still have to service my audience ultimately. This isn't my personal blog about what Dan Shu likes to cover and play. This is, what do the readers want to read about? So I have to be open-minded about that sort of thing.
Gotcha. Now, in talking about sending an email, addressing something to possibly get the attention of a game blogger, is there an angle? Like, I liked how the social media aspect of the don't let the 23-year-old, and I kind of like the concept of the headline where it's saying, don't do this or this guy's wrong, because that's intriguing to you. Do you find that would be something that would work with a game blogger as well?
Yeah, it's the same principles. Like we want to have good headlines. If I said Call of Duty hands-on preview, or Angry Birds hands-on preview, that's kind of boring and generic.
And right? I kind of know what it's going to be as soon as I open it up.
Yeah. You get that sort of thing from a lot of different press sites. So I'm looking for something a little bit interesting. Like, and I'm just making this up, like why Angry Birds, the franchise, will die with this new edition. I'm trying to think of something controversial. That's not a real headline,
right?
Just to be clear. But something like that, if that were true and I could back that up, would get the attention. And if that's hard to relate to, if people are like, well, I don't write stories, I'm not up in media, I'm not a writer. If another way to look at it, I think of it as like online dating, right? Like you get so many people coming at you. Maybe speed dating, it might be like this, where you have hundreds of pitches and 100 of potential candidates, but what do you do to stand out? You have to think about that, like what makes your game interesting, or what makes your team interesting, or what makes you interesting to make people want to write about you when there's hundreds of other similar products that we could cover.
Wow, Shu, I have a lot of friends that would be thrilled to get half of the hundreds of people coming at you on the dating sites.
No, well, that's not a personal example.
Okay, I got you. Just throwing the numbers out there as an example. I got you. Now, what are clones to do? Can clones get covered by top media outlets, or should they not even bother?
That's a really good question. That's tough because the thing is, if I see a match 3 type game, you know, I kind of generally think like, or Clash of Clans might be a better example, where I feel like every other game coming out now and being marketed to me is a Clash of Clans clone, and they're really tiring, and there's nothing that kind of makes me interested in that. So those types of games, if I get that sense immediately, it's almost instant. I'm not interested unless, you know, a famous developer was behind it. Again, if there's an interesting story behind its creation or why this game exists, then I'll take a look. So, you know, developers have to swallow their pride a little bit and realize what's newsworthy might not be their creation, but what's behind the creation, you know, or perhaps even then they might not even realize they're actually really interesting, and they might not realize it.
Would you cover another runner game after Temple Run and Subway Surfers?
Yeah, if there's something interesting about the story, you know, like we covered one recently, a game called Photonica, and it was just because it had a very interesting visual art style, and then. Actually, this leads me to another point. Sometimes it's not about coverage about one game. Photonica we covered because we decided, you know what, there's something there. There's these other games that have really futuristic, minimalist digital art styles, like sort of like Tron, you know. And then we said, well, why don't we do a roundup of these games? Because a story about any one of the games in this story might not have produced much traffic for us.
Right.
But we talked about the sort of new art style that's coming about and mentioned these games within that. Sometimes that helps. And I have a great example of this where there's a game called, I think it's called Tiny Brains, and the PR person pitched us on this one game. It's just having 4 players get together to solve puzzles together, and they're shrunken down little mice, and they have to try to complete puzzles to get to the next stage.
Okay.
The game itself is interesting, but it might not warrant a full story. But then the PR person pitched me, it's like, well, the creators are really into couch gaming, right? The idea of you can still sit around with your friends on a couch looking at one television and playing a game on the same screen, because we're used to this world where everything is online and you don't get that in-person interaction anymore.
Right. You miss the days of Blades of Steel, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So So I said, well, okay, you know what? That's an interesting bit. It's not your game specifically, but the concept of how some developers are still holding on to this old idea of like, couch gaming is so cool. So we did a story about couch gaming, and then we included that game, and we included others as well. And that's sometimes the way to go is you want to pitch a broader, wider view of something rather than your game specifically. And that's hard to do, right? Because that means you're giving up some real estate in the story. It means they're going to cover other games as well, but that might be your best chance at getting some coverage.
Yeah, I was going to say, at least it's some coverage. It's better than no coverage at that point.
Exactly.
And I think you got that idea pitched from a PR person, but I think that's something that as a developer, you would have the ability, knowing where you're either getting your motivation from or where your background lies, that could become an interesting story for you.
Absolutely.
Now, how do you guys decide whether or not to cover a game? Do you personally go after it, play it a little bit? Is a video trailer enough? What is it that is the process for you guys on deciding to cover a game?
Sometimes we'll play it. Sometimes we don't know we're onto something good unless we actually get our hands on it.
Sure.
So, developers have to be ready to get that into your hands because, we do see some pitches which is just on a concept stage, or they have some artwork to show us, maybe a preliminary trailer. And sometimes that's fine because, as I was saying, if you have an interesting story behind the creation of a game, that's what we may be more interested in rather than the game itself. But you have to be prepared if we do want to play it. So what does that mean? It might mean you have to send us a build. You have to get it to us through test flight. You have to send us a phone with the game preloaded, or depending on the platform, you have different ways of getting the game to us. But you have to be prepared in case they ask, because some people care about that more than others. But I think ultimately that's probably less important because we have so much stuff to play. It's hard to find time. So sometimes it's just better to have that interesting story. But that said, I will say, I mean, it's a very good point, because there's a lot of times where a developer or a PR person, they're just like, you know what, I just want 10 minutes of your time, either at this conference, or we'll come to your office. We won't bother you after that. We just want you to check out this game. And I'm like, all right, I could give you that. And then I got hooked, or that was enough to get me interested in producing a story out of that piece, out of that game.
With that, and I find this to be something that has affected different aspects of my life, but how important is personality of a developer who pitches you? Like, give us an example when an unknown indie game developer that won you over with their personality.
An indie developer. I don't know if Jonathan Blow is a classic example of. I like to use him as an example of someone to learn from, because he's very prolific. He created the game Braid, and he's working on a game called The Witness. Now he made some good games, right? Like that's first and foremost. That's the most important thing. But he's not afraid to put himself out there. He'll say stuff on social media. He'll do interviews. He has a personality, and the press, we love that, right? We love someone who's quotable, who's charming, who has interesting things to say. A lot of people get a lot of press just from their personality alone. Right. Another example I use is Peter Molyneux. His games lately, he was a really famous game designer, had a lot of big hits a decade and two ago. Lately, not so much, but the guy continues to get press because he's just charming. He has personality, and you can't help but love interviewing him, because he always has something interesting to say.
So that on that level, personality really has a huge payoff.
Yeah, it's a lot of times you get these developers that they're still kind of awkward, and it's fine. Like, I'm not trying to make people something that they're not, but sometimes they're just kind of awkward. They're not social. They're just engineers, right? They're just heads down programmers. They're creating something interesting. But it's not to say that we're not going to cover your game, but that's an additional barrier versus if you came and talked to me and instantly it's like, whoa, I want to know more about you. I want to know what you're doing because you have a really cool or interesting personality.
And at the end of the day, we're talking about a full story that is what you guys are looking for. So it helps to have all of that, the personality aspect, the gaming aspect. I also imagine, like, if you get somebody coming to you and they're pitching with giveaways and contests, does that make a good story at all, or is that less traction?
It does, but that depends on a product, because we'll definitely have some people, companies that come to us and say, hey, we'll give you 50 codes to your audience, and just some people don't care. They've never heard of this game before. It's not on their radar. So it doesn't move the needle on social media or traffic at all. But that is a way. I think sometimes if there are physical goods involved, gamers seem to love swag. It's like, a t-shirt or a plushie toy or something like that. That seems to work really well, but that's an expensive proposition, to produce physical items to ship to somebody for free. But yeah, free codes, that's a little bit tougher. A lot of companies like to say, hey, we'll get you early beta access to this massively multiplayer game. And no one cares because no one's heard of this game and it doesn't have that momentum. So I think that's more sometimes a later thing, like maybe once you've gotten some attention through marketing or press or PR, then people have your game on their radar, then they might be interested in trying it out.
Around the corner, the best way, day, time, everything you need to know about approaching a journalist. Hsu will let us in on some of that insight of the actual reaching out prospect. The editor-in-chief of GamesBeat, Hsu, joins us again in seconds here on the AppInTop podcast.
This podcast is produced with support from AppInTop, an automated mobile app marketing platform in App Store and Google Play.
This is the AppInTop Mobile App Marketing Podcast. I'm Mike Bauer. Dan Hsu, the editor-in-chief of GamesBeat, joins us today to talk about how to get your game covered by the industry press. And now that you know what you're up against when it comes to approaching the media about your app, maybe it's time to find out what sets you apart from the norm. Some great advice already, specifically when it comes to having a really good headline to start off. But Hsu, how should a developer approach a journalist? Are you likely to respond to an email or a cold email? Do you react better to introductions, phone calls? What level, if you would put like in an order for me, you're most likely to get a reaction from Shoe?
Well, the first thing is if you got my attention, and it's very broad, but that's the number one thing is you have to fight through that noise. So it's either you have something interesting about the development, or maybe there's something that your game's doing that no one else is doing or no one has done before. Like sell that point. Don't sell just your game. Sell me the most interesting about your game, whatever that is. That's number one. Introductions are always good. That's when I said earlier, sometimes having like PR is a very underestimated thing. Mm-hmm. It's because those people have relationships with a lot of the media already. They know who will cover what and why, what motivates them. That's also really important as well. So I met a developer recently, Chobo Labs, because a friend of mine knew their co-founder and introduced me. So automatically it's like, okay, well, I can't help but have that person on my radar. I'm still going to treat the company fairly like everyone else. It doesn't get any special treatment, but it has an advantage because now it's like someone forced that in front of my face through a friend of mine. So that's definitely helpful as well.
If you have that introduction and then of course you've got a great game to back that up, then at least that increases your chance of coverage on the game.
Yeah, definitely. And they're tools that, a lot of people listening might say, well, I don't know anybody. I don't have the budget for PR. What do I do? But there are things, you can kind of seek out ways to network and to find people. There's LinkedIn as an example, right? Maybe you might not know a journalist, but someone else you do might be able to make that introduction for you. So LinkedIn's always a valuable tool for that. We use it all the time to get connected to sources. Another thing to consider would be I'm sorry, I lost my thought there.
No problem. So LinkedIn, I was gonna go this direction anyways. Do game bloggers tend to respond to a LinkedIn comment or a question if you actually through contacts that you have in the networking aspect of LinkedIn, if you do get a hold of a game blogger, is LinkedIn a way to go? Twitter, or is kind of that realm of social media, does that it not as personal, and like you haven't, while maybe you've done some detective work, you haven't really brought to the table a fully constructed email headline story type of contact?
You still need that, right? That's still the most important thing, is like what your story is or what's interesting. How do I get your attention? Even though you got the introduction, you don't know how well I know that person who's introducing us, right? It's like the example I gave earlier was from a direct friend, so that put that company right on my radar immediately. But if this is through someone on LinkedIn that is a first-degree connection, but I really don't know this person, and he makes the introduction to this developer, I might not give that much weight because I'm like, well, I don't know any of you people.
Right.
Again, it's adding to a lot of noise. Twitter I don't like because I get a lot of pitches from Twitter and I generally don't respond. Part of it is just there's enough there to have to sift through on Twitter.
Sure.
And part of it is also that you get so little information, and I don't want to. I sort of feel like, if I respond to one, and Twitter being as public as it is, I'm sort of opening the floodgates for everyone to pitch me on Twitter, right?
Right.
Same thing with Facebook. So I try to avoid those and just say, okay, if you want to find me, you should know through my website how to find me. And actually, when I lost my train of thought earlier, I remember this is all related. I remembered what that was, which is blasting everyone you know with the same information is one of the least effective ways to reach out to the media as well. You might treat it like a numbers game, but you're going to get the bad end of the results of how numbers games work, right? Because I can see through a blast press release right away. I know, okay, like I could tell 100 of my peers in the industry probably got this exact same email. That makes me less likely to want to cover it because here's this unknown IP, an unknown product that's going to be already kind of difficult to get traffic for, but now everyone else is seeing the same thing. I'm not getting anything new or exclusive or unique. Why bother? Those are easy emails to delete, press releases. So when someone takes the time to write me an individual email. I've had people say, "Hey, I'm from the University of Michigan as well. I'm a big football fan of the University of Michigan Wolverines." Or, "Hey, I saw you like snowboarding." Cheap tactics, sure, but they work because I felt like someone took the time to read about me or look at my bio and send me a personalized message. Maybe they're doing this to everyone else, but it feels better than a mass mailing.
You have to add make some sort of a personal attachment to the individual.
Definitely. It's harder to say no because now I start to feel bad. Okay, this person took the time. I don't want to just delete it right away. And the other thing too is the smartest pitches are the ones that come from developers who know which writer at an outlet to target. So, for example, if you're talking to a big website that has a dozen writers, but one of them is the mobile guy, or one of them is the platformer guy, or one of them reviewed a game that's similar to yours really well, there's your in. It's like, oh, hey, I saw that you reviewed this game, ABC game, and you gave it a 95 out of 100. I want to tell you about mine because mine is that but better, and here's why. And just use that as your in and target who you're sending messages to rather than just blasting everybody.
He is Dan Hsu, editor-in-chief of GamesBeat, joining us here on the AppInTop podcast. So we know now, headline, we know that if there's a possibility to get an introduction, that's a way to go. I also think the personalization part is very important. Is there a time of day that is better to reach out to you? I mean, obviously, as we started this interview off, you were saying you had 50 or so pitches that have already come into you at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Is there a better time of day? Does it matter at all when it comes to when you're most likely to see a pitch headline email?
Well, I imagine that everyone would probably have a different idea for how this goes, but my day generally looks like the first couple hours is just going through email and getting my inbox down to a more manageable level. So I feel like that's probably one of the worst times to get me. I'm just trying to plan out everything else for the day, but maybe toward the end of the day, that's when my inbox has slowed down. So I think and I don't even know if I should be saying this because I'm just asking for trouble and more emails now. But because you asked, I have to be honest about it. I think towards the end of the day, like after 3, 4 o'clock is when my inbox slows down. So it's a little bit easier to get my attention.
I think I would imagine the same thing. If I were picking a time, I would say the same thing because I would think that, shy of probably dangerously close to you clocking out and you just wanting to get out of there, later in the afternoon, you've already sort of filtered through, sifted through everything in your inbox, and now things are going to gain your attention. Your normal business stuff is coming through from inside the company as well as outside the company. So maybe that kind of slower time rather than just coming in first thing. And like you said, that's where you have to sift through everything. That's where things are going to be thrown away a little easier.
Yeah, in that early morning when I first logging into my email, that's when I'm in mass delete mode.
Yes.
Right? I'm like, I got 150 unread emails. I got to get that down to something more reasonable.
Now, this I find to be a very interesting question, and I just want to get your opinion on it because in different realms and different aspects of my life, when I've been looking to talk with somebody, connect with somebody, be it about a job, and specifically in my world about a job, what about following up? How many times should somebody follow up without annoying you? Is there a key number for you or a length of time? I always think about in Swingers when Jon Favreau is making the call immediately every 5 seconds. As soon as the tape runs out, he calls another time. Like, is there a time frame that you should follow up with, or more importantly, a time frame with you shouldn't follow up with?
Well, I think very, very generally speaking, if you this might be relevant to the Swingers analogy,
yes.
But waiting a couple of 2-3 days, following up once, and then another week, following up one more time, and then you really have to give up at that point.
Yeah.
The tough part about that is you just I know what it must feel like on the other end because did they get my first email? Are they seeing any of these emails? Am I talking into an empty room? And sometimes you might want to try somebody else and say and not do it in a way that looks like you're trying to go around people. But, for example, if I talk to Steve and he didn't respond, I might try Jennifer at the same outlet and say, oh, by the way, I talked to Steve, but just in case he's busy, I want to flag this for you as well. Like something kind of friendly like that doesn't kind of sound like you are annoyed that no one's getting back to you.
Right. You're like, why is Steve ignoring me?
Yeah. And you have to be sensitive to that and just realize that it's never personal, right? We actually get emails. We get people that are they get angry that we didn't respond. They get kind of uptight about that, and it's just funny to us because we're like, listen, you're one of 100 people who are trying to get your games in front of our eyes today that we just cannot get to them all. Like that could be a full-time job. It's just answering emails.
Oh, you're not kidding. I mean, just in the thoughts of, especially, and now bump into effect, you're at a convention time, and now you've got the hundreds upon hundreds of people hitting you up. It just seems to me like you would have to hire some form of an assistant in order to get that going.
Yep.
Should you contact more than one blogger at the same outlet? Like you just said, I know that the etiquette would indicate that you don't want to complain. You don't want to, be the person that's going like, Steve just keeps ignoring me, Jennifer. What am I going to do? But if you're doing it in a friendly fashion, it's okay to tell them that you're talking to somebody else as well?
I think if your first target, it depends on what your goal is, right? If it's some timely embargoed news and, you're getting it to everybody in time to have 1 or 2 days notice. Sometimes you might just have to email multiple people at once. But I think, as I was saying with the press blast, sometimes when I feel like I'm just getting the same email that a lot of other people are saying, it's easier for me to dismiss. And another way to look at that is if you email 3 of us at GamesBeat, for example, at the same time, you've left open that possibility that all of us think someone else will handle it.
Exactly.
Right? Because we're all busy, and it's like, this is Dean's beat, and he might take care of this. Or Dean might think, oh, I'm on vacation right now, or I'm out of office, and Jason's going to have to take care of it.
Right. Or Shoe just put me on this project, so he knows I'm busy. He'll of course take care of this.
Yep. Yeah. So
I gotcha.
That's definitely a danger.
What about in the context of the email itself? Is less more? Do you want to keep it kind of short? I imagine if you're first thing in the morning, you're sifting through all these emails, you don't want to read a lengthy 5-page letter. But what is a good, solid this email? Not only if there's a great headline or if it's referred from somebody that I know. What's a good context of an email length?
That's a very good question because, yes, absolutely shorter is better. If you write me a wall of text because you're trying to get everything in and you want to sell me on the game, think of it as the articles you read online. There's some days where you're busy and you're just not in the mood for long-form content. And what are the pieces that do well on the internet that get passed around the most are the short, punchy bits, right? Yeah. No one wants to watch a 10-minute YouTube video anymore. No one wants to read a 5,000-word article anymore. So same thing is you keep it short and concise and punchy. So, in the beginning, grab the reader's attention, give us enough so we know what your game's about. And another trick is what I like is when people include video. And
I was going to ask about that. Visuals, do you have to embed something, attach?
Videos are great. If you include the link to a YouTube video, for example, a lot of companies now use Gmail, so that displays the video player right at the end of the email, which is very handy because I don't have to go anywhere. I just let the video player is right there. There's an icon at the bottom of this email with a big play button asking for me to click on it. And sometimes I won't even read the email. I'll just I have to do this quickly. Let me get a quick 30-second snapshot. And I might not even watch the whole video, but it might give me enough to say, wow, this looks really interesting. And there have definitely been games that I decided I wanted to cover just because from a 30-second snapshot like that, it was interesting enough to make me want to dig in a little further.
Yeah, certainly investigate it a little bit further. Okay, that's good to know. And is it not a good idea to attach, like you said, have the YouTube link, but not attach the video because the last thing you want to do is clog up anybody's inbox?
Oh yeah, don't give me something I'm going to have to download or a lot of times I'll see some people send me a Dropbox link to files so I could get the logo, the trailer, screenshots, B-roll, things like that. I'm like, wait a minute, you're getting ahead of yourself. I'm not, how do I even know if I want to cover your game? Let's get through that step first before filling my inbox with a lot of stuff that I might not need. And the other thing to think about is we all like exclusives. We don't want to run the same thing that every other outlet's going to run. So it goes back to what I said about a personalized email. So if you said to me, for example, all other things being equal, if I got an individualized custom email that was targeted to me for GamesBeat, and this person knew my audience, it's like, okay, well, you guys talk to the more in the know and industry knowledgeable gamers. You do a little bit more industry news. So here's my angle that fits that, because I'm not sending the same email to everyone, and you're not getting the same email as everyone. And let me send you I'm offering you exclusive assets, so you're not getting the same press screenshots that everyone else will have access to. All that stuff matters and makes it much more interesting to me.
That makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. I don't think enough people think about it, but it makes a lot of sense. So is this something that you as an individual developer can do on your own? Is it better to hire a PR firm? And Shu, editor-in-chief of GamesBeat, will give, I'm going to ask you this, Shu, top 3 tips for success and top 3 things to avoid in order to try to get that press coverage, coming up in moments here on the AppInTop podcast.
This podcast is produced with support from AppInTop, an automated mobile app marketing platform in App Store and Google Play.
Yes, this is the AppInTop mobile app marketing podcast. I'm Michael Bauer, your host. We would love to hear from you, so please send us your comments via Facebook at facebook.com/AppInTop. Tweet us your questions, comments, and thoughts at AppInTop_com. Just don't send us an email with any kind of attachments, as we're learning from Shu. Now, getting the attention of those influential gaming bloggers, it takes time. And according to what Shu is telling us, there are some certain things you do and you don't. We'll get to his top 3 coming up in moments. But Shu, it sounds like an awful lot like PR agencies will certainly help your cause when it comes time to making the contacts. Does working with a specialized agency help get your attention, as opposed to just if you're looking at 2 emails, there's somebody you know, somebody you've not seen, do you go to the PR email first?
Yes, and I hate saying that, especially because we all know, like, PR has this negative connotation, right? People don't like working with them. They're the gatekeepers of information. And given the choice, if I could work directly with the developer or work through PR, I'd rather work directly with the developer because there's no filter at that point. And it seems counter to what I just said, but I have to be honest, and I bet you most journalists will tell you this, PR helps because, all right, here's this person whose livelihood is to get that coverage, is to get that press. And I know when I email PR, they're going to be responsive in getting me the assets that I need, getting the information, bugging the developer. So, or maybe it's a busy founder or CEO, somebody who doesn't have a lot of time, and the PR person's job would be to stay on top of them to get me the stuff that I need. That's very helpful because I don't have necessarily that time for it, and I don't want to be the person who's a pain in the ass bothering this person every couple of days. And again, the relationships help because the best PR people are the ones who know, all right, I'm going to target this game to this outlet, this game to this person, because they know who is interested in writing what. That saves you a lot of time because you as a developer may not know. You might just say, okay, well, I have to contact XYZ outlets, and you might not know whom to contact in there, and they don't know you. Having that inside connection through PR is definitely helpful.
All right, I'm going to ask you specific here now, Shu. Just today alone, so I'm not asking for who the best is or who your favorite is, but the first 3 PR agencies that you responded to today are who?
Today I've been so busy, I don't think I've responded to PR today. But let's say in the last week or so, probably near the top of my list would be Triple Point PR, 47, Sandbox, 1 PR. I know that's 4, but those are Access Communications. These are companies that I know the people really well, and they generally don't waste my time. They know what I'm looking for in stories and coverage and from their clients, so they do a good job of filtering stuff to me. Is
it, just out of curiosity, is it possible to become a contributing blogger on GamesBeat?
Yeah, actually, we do it in an interesting way. So I had an old company called BitMob, which I sold to VentureBeat, and we rolled in the ideas into GamesBeat. And the idea is you could sign up as a community member, and you can post your own stories. And we have a couple of different phases of moderation. First, we make sure it's not spam. Then it goes to this section called GB Unfiltered, which is just where all the community stories go. And then we cherry pick our favorite ones, edit those, and then post those to the front page of the site. So it's a pretty cool thing, and we're revamping all the code and relaunching it in the next month or so. But you can learn more. If you just go to our About page on GamesBeat, you can learn more about the program.
All right, Shu, you've given us some pretty solid insight here. To sort of recap, I want you to give me the top 3 keys that you feel are the big keys in successfully getting the attention of a game blogger or journalist, and then the top 3 things, the pitfalls that you would need to avoid 100%.
Sure. One of them, actually, we didn't talk much about, I don't think, but one is, number one, for a key to success is to make your game memorable, right? It goes from the logo to the game's name to the aesthetic design to the story, the setting, whatever it is. It should be memorable and not feel like a copycat of every other game out there. You know, if you have that, you're automatically way ahead of the game. 2, give us an interesting angle. You know, sometimes it's not about your game; it's about the creation of the game, something that development hell that you had to go through to make that happen. Something interesting about the developers and their lives growing up and how they became a game developer. Whatever that is, give us that interesting angle because that might be our story. Number 3 is to target your targets. Like, don't just send out emails to anyone. Find out who likes the kind of games that you're making, who's friendly to them, who might have reviewed competitors of yours in the past, and then target those guys. And then on the flip side, like the things to avoid, one is related to what I just said. Don't do the generic email blasts. Those ones that are just worded in that vague third-person way where I just know, okay, everyone else is getting that same email. Don't do that. Those are the easiest to delete. 2, don't assume that we know your game already. I still don't understand why this happens, but I get so many email pitches where they just jump right into it. It's like, hey, ABC is going gold, or ABC is launching, or it's on Kickstarter now. And it's like, I've never heard of your game.
Like, what the hell is ABC?
Yeah, like, why would you do that? Because there's nothing in there that would hook me. So don't assume that we know the game. Tell us something else about it. 3, don't be boring. And I don't mean just in your emails, of course, that's obvious, but also yourself. You know, if you meet a press guy at a conference, or you bump into someone, or you get introduced, be interesting. You know, like be someone that they would like to meet and talk to and learn more about your products.
Does that, and just out of curiosity, at those kinds of events, you're open to that as well? If you happen to bump into somebody introduces themselves to you, you're on a panel, something along those lines, that is also a good way to go about getting sort of that hand-on-hand introduction, the shaking hands introduction?
Yeah, it happens, and you can't really avoid it. Like, whenever I do a panel or do anything on stage, there's always a line of people afterward, and it's not to tell me how good looking or how great I was, right? It's all people who want something out of me, and that's fine. It's just part of the business. So again, you know, you might be, I might be on a way to another appointment or a meeting, and I might be super busy. So you have to you might be one of 5 or 10 people in line to try to introduce yourself and give me your card. So use that time wisely. You know, it's, again, it might be like speed dating where, okay, you only have 30 seconds or a minute to impress that journalist. Make it count. Tell us why your game is interesting, why it's covering, and try to get that person's card as well so you can follow up. Because if you expect that press guy to follow up with you and remember your card out of the dozens or hundreds that he might get over the course of a 4-day conference, forget about it. You have to do the following up there.
So you've got a half a minute to make an impact. That's where your headline of you vocally needs to come into play instead of an email form.
Definitely.
Well, Shu, for the past 40-plus minutes, you've given us insight about what journalists love and hate, hopefully making an opportunity to reach out to influential bloggers worth everybody's time. Your top 3 keys to success, top 3 pitfalls, and mainly I understand the concept of why people would want to do the generic email blast, but as Shu said, take the time, and it will make a difference. It will have a payoff if you personalize something like that. Shu, thank you so much for your time. You are now officially free to go.
Thanks very much.
And
now I got to get to all those emails.
There you go.
The last 40
and
minutes.
to all of you listening, thank you very much for listening. This has been the AppInTop Mobile App Marketing Podcast. Make sure you visit our daily blog, blog.appintop.com, where you can find all this great information and much, much more every single day. Until next time, I'm Mike Bauer. See ya.
The AppInTop Mobile App Marketing Podcast is produced by
AppInTop.com.